Welcome to the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMKT, where daily fantasy sports becomes stock exchange. Download the JockMKT app in the App Store today. Android app coming soon. I'm Derek Van Riper here along with Jake Seeley and Brandon Funston, getting you ready for week 7 of this fantasy football season. Hard to believe we're here already. Later in today's show, we'll be joined by Michael Beller. Ed Malian is back with another installment of Brits Picks after an amazing call last week at the tight end position. Virginia Zakas of Inside Injuries will join us today as well, and the Athletics' Chris Burke will stop by at about noon Eastern to talk about the Lions. As always, we will take your questions throughout the show. Send those our way on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, wherever you're watching us over the next 90 minutes. Gentlemen, we begin today with Antonio Brown because 2020 is 2020, and there's no way we could have made it through this year without having Antonio Brown back in our lives as fantasy football players again. As it goes now, his contract with the Bucs will become official on Monday, according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. He's tentatively scheduled to debut in Week 9 against the Saints because he's still finishing up a suspension from the NFL for multiple violations of the league's personal conduct policy. So, Jake, why is Tampa Bay even interested in Antonio Brown with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans already there as one of the best wide receiver tandems you could possibly put on the field?
Because Tom Brady runs the team, not Bruce Arians, as we've seen be clear in this offseason. Hey, we have no interest in Gronk at this point, and there's no room for Antonio Brown in this team. And guess who's on the team? Both these guys. Look, you can't have too many weapons for Tom Brady at this point of his career either, because Tom Brady is not the quarterback from 5, 6, 7 years ago who made everybody good. He's still really good. He's still Tom Brady. But at this point, if you can get Tom Brady another weapon, I don't see why you don't do this. For the fact of what I compared it to is the Cowboys now, and why I have concerns about Mike Evans is that Cooper and Lamb are essentially, if Antonio Brown's even 90% of what he was, Antonio Brown and Chris Godwin are those two, and the long option route, the one that develops routes downfield, is the ones with the high air yards that's inconsistent, and you maybe get one good game out of 3 or 4 is Evans and Gallup. So I would actually have concerns about Evans at this point.
The two-word answer is Super Bowl. This is their window. They're absolutely going for it. I mean, you bring in Leonard Fournette. You already have Cameron Brayton, O.J. Howard. You bring in Rob Gronkowski. I mean, they got 1 to 2 year window here to go for the Super Bowl. I think right now they look like, they feel like they probably have a chance to be the class of that division and to really, come out of the NFC. So Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, they haven't been healthy together, from week to week very often. So you take care of that problem by having a third guy in Antonio Brown, the guy that Tom Brady loves. And obviously we know he's a great talent. Does it do anything to the team chemistry? We'll see, but you can't deny the talent. And to me, they're just plugging every possible potential hole they can.
So Brandon, do you think, as Jake kind of laid out, the similarities between the Bucs offense with Antonio Brown is going to be fair with the Dallas comparison? Like, do you see this offense being good enough to sustain all 3 of those guys week in and week out, assuming that they're all even healthy at the same time?
I mean, I think Arians is, that's the kind of style he likes to play. I think they can have a little bit narrower tree. I bet you're not going to see a ton of, if Antonio Brown's out there, you're not going to see a ton of passes to the running backs. Maybe Rob Gronkowski's blocking more. They're not utilizing the tight end. They're narrowing that tree so that they can just really go after their three big wide receivers. So I think they'll have an easier time accommodating those guys as opposed to Dallas, who throws a ton to Ezekiel Elliott into the tight end. I don't think you can see, Tampa. I mean, Bruce Arians doesn't really love to throw the tight end by nature anyways. So this just gives him more of an excuse not to.
Yeah, perhaps another little downgrade for Gronk once Antonio Brown is a part of the Tampa Bay offense. Let's move on to Green Bay. I think one of the players we're keeping a close eye on this morning as inactives become available is Aaron Jones. He may be down today with a calf injury. We do not have the official word yet. He did travel with the team to Houston, which is why this is still pending here, just about 30 minutes before inactives are released. Let's think about this in terms of Jones potentially missing this game, Jake. Is this a big Jamal Williams volume day, or could this be an opportunity for the Packers to give A.J. Dillon an opportunity?
I think you could be concerned about A.J. Dillon. I do think it would be Jamal Williams majorly, more so because what we've seen from the other rookie running backs, and A.J. Dillon's also missed time with injuries. But a lot of them this year is what the concern was with no preseason is, are they going to be blocking in the NFL? Are they going to miss assignments? Are they going to know the playbook enough? Are they going to be out there? All these type of things. And if you're talking about pass catching in general, you're going to go Jamal Williams over A.J. Dillon. So you want the power for A.J. Dillon, similar to kind of a lesser man's version of Derrick Henry. So I do think he'll be involved, but I'm not afraid of using Jamal Williams. I mean, obviously, this could go sideways real quickly, especially if they're down. Then neither one of them are involved much, but it still would be Williams more. So I lean Williams, but of course, it's a risk, as we've seen from Alexander Madison stepping in. Boston Scott had a poor week one. He had a poor game until the very end and got that touchdown. So there's always risk when you're talking about the next man up who's not as talented as the guy in front of him.
Yeah, a lot of interest in season long in guys like Jamal Williams as fill-ins, maybe as RB2s or as flex options. A lot of interest in DFS too, where they're cheap. Got a question here from Scrub. Start 2 in PPR leagues. Got a couple of these guys to choose from. Gio Bernard, who's starting today with Joe Mixon down, Jamal Williams, T. Higgins, and DeAndre Swift. What do you think, Jake?
I think you have to, if no Aaron Jones, you have to go with 2 replacements. It'd take it down so quick, Nando. I'm trying to read the question. Like, if Aaron Jones is out there, I don't think that he's too different, that being Jamal Williams, than Swift. And for what you're talking about the risk, you're talking about more opportunities for Swift, but are really trusting Patricia at this point. So in a full point PPR, if there is Aaron Jones, I would actually probably go Gio and Higgins, despite the fact that I hate they're both on the same team, Brandon.
Yeah, I think the point, I think Aaron Jones probably isn't going to play. So I feel the best about Jamal Williams. I would go Jamal and Gio, like you kind of, pointed out at the very beginning. In the scenario where there is Aaron Jones, you said you're going Higgins and Gio?
Yeah. And then Gio again here over Swift.
Yep.
Beat you to it, DVR.
What do you think, Brandon? Gio over Swift?
Yeah, back to what Jake said, the Patricia. I mean, I just don't trust it. I don't trust, he could have a bigger workload. It could be more snaps, but it could just not net out as a whole lot. I mean, 14 carries. I don't know. I just don't have the confidence that I can feel like he's going to come in this week and get another 14 carries. I could see it being like 8 or something. I'm going to keep the chance of the rug getting pulled out from under me out of my equation if I can, and go with a more sure thing in Gio.
I am curious when we visit with Chris Burke later, like what his take is as someone who's covering this team, who's around this team a lot. Is this a Matt Patricia thing? Is it a Darrell Bevel thing? Could it change? Are we just paranoid as fantasy players? I think that's a fair question to ask at this point. We've been burned enough times by Patricia in particular. We've got a really nasty weather game on tap today in Denver, where the Kansas City Chiefs are visiting. What do you do when you have cold weather, extremely cold weather, potentially some wind, and in this case, some snow in the forecast, Jake? Is this a bad enough forecast to start making adjustments to your plans with the Chiefs and Broncos that you otherwise would have had locked into your lineups?
Yeah, I'm looking right now to see, because you mentioned the wind too. The wind doesn't look like it's getting to 15 because, as referenced, it's good timing. My rankings article at the beginning talked about what weather does. It's the 15, 25, 35 rule. And the rule for 35 is temperature under 35. And then the wind is when you get to 15 plus, but it looks like it's going to top out at 14. So you have a little bit of snow and you have the temperature. So that's where I do say it's a little bit concerning, because you have the two go hand in hand. You see about a 5, maybe 10% drop at most when you talk about snow and temperature of this degree. So I did knock down Mahomes a little bit, Tyreek Hill a little bit. I've swapped Kelsey and Kittle as 1 and 2, but that's the thing, is like I'm not moving them that far. This is kind of tie break decisions. Obviously, this could go the opposite direction, and maybe it's just a very slow game. The Vegas line is dropping continuously because they know this, because they know those numbers. But I can't see benching Mahomes, but maybe if you just fell into something terrific, I can't even think of quarterbacks that you could have fallen into that you could be able to start over him at this point. Maybe if you have Josh Allen as well, but they're going to move a little down in the rankings, but not enough where you're going to be benching your studs, quote unquote.
Cuban Links has a question. Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Kenyon Drake in a half-point PPR?
It actually helps the running back.
Yeah,
so
the running back volume should be up. So, I mean, I'm still pretty comfortable with Edwards-Helaire.
And the one thing you always say for everybody that knows football like we do, and I wasn't saying like whatever, I'll just continue. So if you know football, the running back knows where he's going. Defenders don't. When you talk about a slick surface, whether it's rain, snow, temperature, whatever it is, these often help the running backs, especially elusive ones like Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, remember the LaShawn McCoy game a few years back?
LaShawn McCoy was set to forget it if it was snowing.
Yeah, exactly.
Brandon, question for you, just as it pertains to the Chiefs' backfield. Le'Veon Bell's going to debut today for Kansas City. How much of a role should we expect? Clyde Edwards-Helaire just had a huge game against Buffalo last time out. So what sort of adjustment are you making to the distribution of touches in that backfield with Bell's arrival?
Yeah, I think if you have any other kind of viable option, I think you just let this one play out with Le'Veon Bell on your bench. I could see him getting his feet wet. I think the worst case scenario, if you leave him on your bench, is that he comes in and steals a touchdown or two. But I just don't think the yardage upside is going to be there, nor the volume yet. I think this is kind of one of those games where you'll see him get something, less than double-digit touches, and yeah, he might get a chance to steal a touchdown. But if that's your upside, you probably have better options.
All right, we got a question here from Brandon. Let's go. Brandon's helping Brandon's on this one. Robert Woods, DJ Chark, Justin Jackson, Phillip Lindsay, Devin Singletary, Chase Edmonds. Pick 3 in a half PPR league.
Okay, I definitely want Justin Jackson. I'll go Devin Singletary, and I don't like the matchup, but I'm going to go Robert Woods. So there you go. Jake, where are you at on that?
Pretty much Justin Jackson and the other two.
Yeah, Singletary and Woods.
No, Lindsay and Chark.
Oh, okay. I was actually torn between Chark and Woods because Chark has the much better matchup. So, and he had the 14 targets. He just didn't do much with the 14 targets last week. I'm worried about just how healthy he is.
Let's continue to move through some injury news here. No Michael Thomas, no Emmanuel Sanders for the Saints. We know Alvin Kamara's volume goes way up in these situations without Thomas, but what about the other options here, Jake? I know you always like to talk about Jared Cook, but I'll kick it over to you with Tre'Quan Smith first. Are you really interested in Tre'Quan Smith kind of across the board this week? He's cheap in DFS. Obviously, there's a target bump coming. Do you trust him enough to go ahead and throw him out there in your season-long matchups?
I actually think he's kind of similar to Robbie Anderson with the Jets, not with the Carolina Panthers. Brashard Perriman with the Jets, if that helps. These type of situations where, even like a Christian Kirk with a slight more volume, it could be a boom or bust day. If you look at the last time this happened recently, Deontay Harris got involved a little bit, but it's actually Marquez Callaway that was out there a lot as well. So in DFS, while everybody's going immediately to Smith, I'm going down to Marquez Callaway, and for $3,000, it's bargain basement min price. I'll take the risk on him. I obviously, if given the choice straight up, I would take Smith, but Smith with number one coverage, Smith back when he was doing these things, Emmanuel Sanders was out there as well. So I do have a little bit of concern of him being able to be the number one attention for defenses, and I think that Callaway could be the sneaky play.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Callaway probably available in a good number of leagues still, too.
All of them?
Yeah, I didn't see him getting picked up any of my leagues this week, so there you go. Let's talk about Joe Mixon and the Bengals backfield for a second. Brandon, how much love do you have for Gio Bernard going up against the Browns? Is he the clear-cut guy? Is it kind of like the Green Bay situation where there's maybe another threat there depending on game script, or is he pretty safe to pick up 15-plus touches this week with ease?
You know who I think he's kind of like is Boston Scott, basically coming in and being plugged in, and his upside is kind of like what we saw from Boston Scott on Thursday night with the 46 rushing yards, the 46 receiving yards, and a touchdown. That's probably the best that you can get from Gio. He's not your traditional featured back, he's not a big guy, but getting 12 to 15 carries in 4 to 6 receptions, I think he can compile his way to helping you out, especially in PPR bump leagues.
Got a question there from Taz in a half PPR league. Pick 1 out of James Robinson, Allen Robinson, Jerick McKinnon, Gio Bernard, David Montgomery, and Melvin Gordon. A lot of choices there. Who do you like, Jake?
Getting in some trades or a different league, or you shouldn't have 5 of these guys on the bench. I don't know how you bench James Robinson at this point. I continually said this. I said this to Brandon and Beller on the show this week. Put Fournette in the back of the jersey. Nobody's questioned him as an RB1, even with the down games.
Yeah, and Chris Thompson out as well. It should be a huge workload.
His low is 9.5 points this year.
Yeah,
that
was my answer to you. I think it's James Robinson for sure.
And Chris Thompson on the COVID IR, so it could be a couple of weeks before he's back in the fold. Sean writes, what's up, guys? Fuller, Woods, Kirk to stack with Kyler, Chark, or Debo. Pick 3 out of 5 in a full PPR league. What do you think, Brandon?
I actually want out on Fuller. Tough matchup for him. I'm going to go Chark. I'm going to go Kirk, and I'm going to go Woods. Man, I hate to hit. I love Debo, but I could see New England being a tough one for him. So yeah, I'll go with those three.
Yeah, that Patriots-Niners game could be a grind. I mean, I know San Francisco is missing a lot of players on defense, so maybe that helps prop up the Patriots offense a little bit, but you look at the over-under total in that one, just looks like a potential slog. I think it's part of that late afternoon block today as well. Let's get to one more topic in this news segment. Sam Darnold is expected to return for the Jets. Unfortunately, no Jamison Crowder. Does it matter in this week's matchup against the Bills? Is this still just a god-awful team, Jake, with very little to get excited about?
No, I think that you can use Brashad Perriman in plenty of leagues, especially with the fact of how poorly the Bills defense is playing, how many pieces they're missing on top of how poorly they've been playing. And then if you want to go with the potential 0 or potential 15, Denzel Mims is back, so you can go with that one. Although I think people have already forgotten about Jeff Smith after his 2 games of volume in a row, and now with no Jamison Crowder, Denzel Mims doesn't fill that role. Brashad Perriman doesn't fill that role. Don't forget about Jeff Smith.
Yeah, better quarterback play could bump up the offense, keep that game a little closer than expected. I think that's a somewhat encouraging development. Maybe. The Bills' offense is fun. I can't remember the last time I said that. It's been a while. 1994, when I was 10, maybe. I liked the Bills' offense back then. Let's get to some matchups and take a look at the adjusted points allowed metric. Jake puts that up every single week. We'll start at the quarterback position. The Lions, the Cardinals, the Jags among the best matchups for quarterbacks this week, which brings me to Gardner Minshew. There are some reports bubbling up that his hold on the starting job in Jacksonville might be loosening, which doesn't really make sense to me at all. Like, their best path is to see what he can do, evaluate him for the future, and if they lose and go 1-15 or 2-14, they're right there in the running for Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields. That seems like a good thing. So is there any reason to be concerned about Gardner Minshew actually losing this job, especially in week 7, Brandon?
I think the biggest reason to be concerned is that they fear that Gardner Minshew has enough upside to accidentally win some games down the stretch, and that's probably the problem. That would be the fly in the ointment. But look, we know who Mike Glennon is. You're right. I think you answered the question, DVR. It kind of behooves them to see what they have in Gardner Minshew, and he hasn't looked great, but fantasy wise, he's been fine. And I have him ranked as a top 10 play this week in this matchup against the Chargers. But look at what's Jacksonville trying to do? Are they? I mean, I guess you kind of have to front like you're trying to win, but really, this season's all about going for Trevor Lawrence.
Jake, do you think this game shoots out, this Jags-Chargers game, as it's kind of in that second tier in terms of the over-under totals? It certainly has some interesting players sprinkled throughout. I mean, do you think it can get to that high total?
It should, with the way that Justin Herbert's playing with, you look at the Chargers, something I mentioned about Minshew from Sports Info Solutions last week is that he really struggles against man coverage. The good news is the Chargers are the bottom third of the league in running man. They're a ton of zone coverage, and they have the offense to keep pace. And the Jaguars' pace of play has been on an uptick recently with some of the matchups that they're facing. They generally are slower themselves, but when they're facing a team that can push the pace, they actually sometimes move their own pace and pick up the pace. So look, Gardner Minshew has 19 plus fantasy points in all but one game. Like, at worst case, like, he's better than Bortles. He's essentially Jameis Winston without the turnovers. Like, yeah, he could go out there and look terrible, but for fantasy purposes, who cares?
Jameis Winston without the turnovers is not that bad. And
No.
weapons, when they're all healthy, aren't bad either. So definitely a good spot for Minshew today. Definitely has some tournament appeal if you're thinking about some DFS lineups as well. On the flip side, bad matchups for quarterbacks. The Raiders, the Rams, and the Saints all check in there. I think the Raiders-Bucks game is a bit of a mystery to me. Like, how concerned are you about Derek Carr in this matchup, Brandon? He's played really well this year, and that's not something I feel like I've ever said about Carr. I think I'm as critical of him as I am of any quarterback in the league. Do you feel like you can go in there and do work against that strong Tampa Bay defense?
Definitely hesitant about that. I mean, you could say the same thing. Aaron Rodgers has looked great, and then all of a sudden he ran out of Tampa. I mean, look at much respect to Todd Bowles. Wherever that guy's at, I'm going to respect that defense, because this guy, maybe can't be a head coach, but he is a stud of a defensive coordinator. They got a lot of speed. Even losing Vita Vea, it didn't seem like they lost a step last week on defense for the Bucs. So yeah, I mean, Derek Carr, you may have to be forced to play him in a super flex 2 QB league, but I'm anything 14, 16 teams or less, single quarterback leagues, I'm not messing with Derek Carr.
Maybe I'm still riding the emotional high of the Raiders offense dropping 40 and beating Kansas City last time we saw them before their bye in week 5. Let's take a look at some good matchups for running backs. The Packers, the Bucks, the Texans among the teams that have the most favorable APAs at that position. One guy that I feel like we haven't talked a lot about over the course of this week is David Johnson. Packers-Texans is getting a lot of attention across the board, season-long, DFS, anywhere. David Johnson, though, is just boring volume play at this stage of his career, and a guy that just hasn't been able to put it together at that level that we were accustomed to earlier in his career in Arizona. What do you think about David Johnson in this matchup, Jake? Do you think this is a spot where you can be a little more aggressive with him and actually come away with a 15, maybe even a 20-point game?
I'm glad you said 15 to start with, because outside of one game, he's Le'Veon Bell 2019, which that was Le'Veon Bell. He's essentially, that's the same thing. About 1, 2, 3 games throughout the season, he didn't hit you double-digit points, and for most games, he kind of settles in that 15 average because it's between 10 and 18 points every single week. It's not exciting because he's not winning you a single game, but he's rarely letting you down. He did it one time this year. And I think in this matchup, I have him as a fringe running back 1 because of the potential of the volume, potential of the upside of the matchup. And what the worst case scenario so far has been is one bad game, but that was not a matchup like he's facing this week. I think he at least gets you a dozen points, if not 15 plus.
Yeah, good matchup. Plenty of touches lined up for David Johnson. Carlos wants to know pick 3 out of David Johnson, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Gio Bernard, DeAndre Swift, and Darrell Henderson.
Derail Henderson, the first 3.
I'd say, yeah.
Yeah, I'm with the first 3 here as well. I want to play Swift over Bernard. I really do, because I don't think Giovanni Bernard is very good anymore. He was fun earlier in his career. He's just a guy. I think the Boston Scott comparison that Funston made earlier is pretty much perfect.
I made that comparison.
I'm giving
You did?
Funston credit.
I came up with that on my own. I honestly did, but
when I asked the question, I said like Alexander Madison and Boston Scott replacing the guys in front of him.
Oh, okay. Well, I'd already used that previously this week, so I'm not. I just want you to know I'm not copying you. I promise.
I think I dropped that on Thursday too. So I don't know who was first.
We're all in the same habit. We're all geniuses.
I think it was back in week 1. I threw that one out.
Gio.
Why are we all starting a guy that we think is Boston Scott? That seems a little bit suspicious.
Because Boston Scott he's going to actually finish as a top 10 running back this week. That's what it comes down to. Is the touchdown came at the end, but it came. And this question right here: Lamb, Chark, or Gio? I mean, I guess if you want the most boomer busted, you could argue it, but how is Gio not a boomer bust? I think that you have to go out there and take Gio and, take it on the chin if it doesn't happen like Alexander Madison, and be happy if it does like Boston Scott. I just don't see how you're benching Gio with no Joe Mixon. Like, really, Travion Williams? That's what we're going to do? Samaje Perine? Really? Like, I understand the risk, but I just don't understand going against the Browns how you possibly bench Gio.
Volume's the biggest aphrodisiac in fantasy, and Gio's getting it. That's what it's all about. It may not be. I mean, like he said about Le'Veon Bell. I mean, it doesn't have to be great, but if you're getting that kind of volume, you're going to make an impact of some sort.
Just for reference, the Chiefs, Patriots, and Raiders among the teams with the worst APAs for running back matchups. Just a heads up there. Not sure you can do a whole lot with it, though. It's not like you're going to sit Josh Jacobs, and you're probably not sitting Clyde Edwards-Helaire either, even with Le'Veon Bell back into the fold for the first time. Let's talk about the wide receiver APAs for a moment. Cardinals, Bengals, and the Washington Footballs actually have the 3 best matchups based on APA. Terry McLaurin is a lock each and every week in season long. He's priced very fairly in DFS yet again this week. Jake, as you look at those teams, where do you see value? I mean, one guy in particular people are probably confused by right now is A.J. Green, coming back from the ashes to put up a nice line last week.
Yeah, I can't trust AJ Green yet. We talked about it on a lot of our shows this week. If they keep using him like they did last week, where they changed his role and trying to get that Larry Fitzgerald late career value out of him, and involving him in the short to intermediate game, some seam routes, some slants, stop sending him 15, 20, 25 yards downfield and just not connecting because they can't anymore. Then I'll have a little bit more excitement next week, and maybe some people don't want to wait for that. But I still think this is T. Higgins number 1, essentially mostly because he is what A.J. Green would have been, and he's the red zone, end zone presence. And Joe Burrow loves him these last 3 games to the point where Tyler Boyd has seen a downtick. But I still think that Tyler Boyd's a number 2, and I don't think it's that big of a gap between Higgins and Boyd. I think it could essentially swap a lot of games, and Boyd's actually got a really great matchup. So maybe while everybody's looking at Higgins and what he's been doing, Boyd is where you see the value for the Washington team. Hey, Dontrell Inman, I mean, I'm thinking 14-plus team leagues, but Inman's already seen some value, and they're down to 3 wide receivers with McLaurin, Inman, and Cam Sims, and maybe they activate somebody today because I have to imagine they get to a 4th receiver somehow, but that's what we have as of right now.
Yeah, I never feel good about those secondary options in Washington, though. Just they're so
Steven
talent
Sims.
depleted.
No, Cam Sims. What could have been?
What could have been with
been.
Steven Sims working out of the
Yes.
slot? He could have been a monster this year. I mean, a monster might be a little bit of like a Nando sort of exaggeration, but he could have been productive this year. There was so much love for Steven Sims on this show, and we're not getting a chance to talk about him every single week. On the flip side, bad matchups at receiver: the Bears, the Saints, and the Rams. Anybody that you're kind of shying away from or sitting down this week as a result of that, Brandon?
Well, I've kind of mentioned my hesitancy with Robert Woods. I've in my one and done pick a player one time leagues, I went with Cooper Kupp. I'm kind of fading the Robert Woods, Kyle Fuller matchup there. So he's one that I'm leery about. I still have him ranked in the top 30 wide receivers, but if he went out there and had like a 20 to 30 yard game, it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, over-under in that game down at 45 for the Bears-Rams matchup on Monday night. Let's move on to our expert roundtable. We're going to bring on Michael Beller and Ed Millian. Got the whole party going here. We've got a lot of great questions for you guys. Good morning, gentlemen. Let's start with a question about Juju Smith-Schuster. How many receiving yards will Juju Smith-Schuster have this week? I was talking about him with Beller on our DFS episode earlier this week, and in terms of your tournament big field leverage plays, it makes all the sense in the world because there's so much interest in Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, of course, and I think that Steelers-Titans game is going to play up at the higher end of the over-under total. I think it's going to hit like that 50-51 range pretty easily, so let's see those answers.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
my God. Look at this. This is insane.
Oh,
wait a minute.
Jake,
54 yards. Look at that.
Over there. All right, so we got a consensus. We got 54, 54, and 55. Jake, 23 for Juju? I think I got to ask you about that. Why so low?
Because he's Randall Cobb. He's toast. He's done for. Deontay Johnson is back. He is arguably the number one, and Deontay Johnson might not even be number one in this game. I still have Claypool because I don't know how you bench Claypool for even Deontay Johnson until we see it change back because we don't know how if Deontay Johnson's 90%, but Juju Smith-Schuster just left out. I hope I'm wrong, but at this point, you could argue he's droppable.
But he's like 23 years old. I don't know if he's Randall Cobb kind of toast.
That's why I put 23.
Oh, nice.
Synergy.
You can't be
synergistic. I like it.
Can't be done yet. I got to think. We're going to talk to Virginia Zakas about injuries. I got to wonder, is he just not completely healthy because he's too talented?
No, it's the usage. They're not using him. They're throwing him like 5-yard passes. By the way, 69, 48, 43, 28, and 6 the past 2 weeks for receiving yards. Tell me 23 is crazy again.
It hurts. He was going out with the 3-4 turn back during draft season, too. Let's move on to our next question. Which Washington running back do you start? Of course, the footballs have that matchup against the Cowboys. J.D. McKissic's been catching a lot of passes. Antonio Gibson working well in that hybrid role. I think he's had at least 9 carries in every game so far. I'm curious to see where you guys go with this one. Oh, we got a nice mix of answers there. Jake's got a lot of glare on his. All right,
JDM.
So I see a both. I see a Gibson, and I see 2 JDMs. I'm going to go to you, Funston. Both. Make the case for both of these guys being viable.
Because they're both getting double-digit touches, and it's the Dallas Cowboys. So, J.D. McKissic, it's like a week when you liked, Damian Harris and James White, or let's pretend Rex Burkhead was the number one guy at like taking the place of Sony Michel, and that's basically like a good matchup for Rex Burkhead and James White. It's kind of J.D. McKissic and Antonio Gibson to me. So as long as they're both, you feel good about them both getting 10+ touches. In a flex, I would play both of them.
All right, some big news, of course, scrolling by on the bottom of the screen. We do have the official word. Aaron Jones out for today's game against the Texans, so we're going to see a lot of Jamal Williams. Might even see a little bit of A.J. Dillon in
I'll
that
update
game
my
as
third
well.
list of rankings.
Yep, get to it, Jake. We have to kick you off the screen so you can get to that. Next question for you guys. Andy Dalton, over or under 260.5 passing yards this week going up against that Washington defense. Still has those weapons healthy, but man, did he look awful, just awful against the Cardinals. We got an unders, way under, 3 arrows in a circle, a 249 and a down. Okay,
Not the best circle in my life.
That's not a good circle. Looks like a potato with some arrows on it for some reason. Not sure what's going on there. I don't know, guys. I mean, is there any reason? The weapons are good. Like, clearly, no one in this room is optimistic about him, but when Dak got hurt, my reaction was, well, Andy Dalton's one of the better backups in the league, and he's got weapons, so maybe it won't be that bad. But we saw it, and it was bad, and you get the reports that the coaching staff seems a little out of sorts maybe in Dallas. Like, does anyone have any reason to be optimistic about this team at all beyond Zeke and the receivers just being super talented?
I'll
Ask
say that
somebody
this
else.
is
I'm
more a
getting a bigger
matchup thing
marker.
for me. It's a matchup thing to me. If this were a different team that they were playing this afternoon, then I might feel better about him going over this number. But I just think with the Dallas offensive line injuries that have stacked up on them, combined with Washington's pass rush, it's just going to get ugly for Matthew Stafford. I'm looking at a Matthew Stafford tab up here for Andy Dalton back there. I do think that there's going to be much better days ahead for this Dallas offense. I mean, Dalton is not bottom of the barrel guy. He's probably not even the worst starter in the NFL right now, and I think he probably is, if you just looked across rosters at the start of the season, the best backup in the NFL. So let's give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt. He had 0 first-team reps before that start against Arizona. He gets thrown into it. Things went off the rails for them right from the start. Bad game script. This is not the matchup to get him back in there, but with all those weapons and his general competence, I do think there's going to be decent days ahead for not only Andy Dalton, but this entire passing game. This is just not the week for it.
Yeah, that Washington front is pretty nasty when they've got everybody healthy. Let's get to
We
our
might
next
give
one.
we might be giving too much credit to this matchup. I don't think Dalton's that good anymore either, to be honest with you. But I think I agree with Beller's assessment about the matchup. It's going to be awful.
All right, let's go to this next one. Who will have more PPR fantasy points today, A.J. Green or Chase Edmonds? I mentioned a little earlier, A.J. Green popping up with a pretty big line last week. A lot of competition for targets. Nice matchup, though. Bengals-Browns could be a pretty fun little shootout today. All right, we got a few answers trickling in here. We got an AJ from Brandon Funston.
My markers are dying.
Yeah, you guys got to get better markers.
Green and green.
Chase.
Green. And I got
Chase.
one Chase from Jake. All right, let's start with you, Ed. AJ Green, you're a believer coming off of last week, or is this a matchup that you just really like?
We're at the lip read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna, there he goes.
I like what the Bengals have. I like Joe Burrow because he swings it. I love T. Higgins. Had to trade him away in Dynasty, and it was really tough for me. Tyler Boyd, obviously, he's going to get a lot of volume out of the slot. But I like AJ Green. I think, he's still got something about him. I don't think they'll put Denzel Ward on him. That's obviously like the thing you'd be scared of against the Browns. So in this battle for Ohio, I think AJ Green can do some things. Chase Edmonds, you can't rely on him week to week. I think there's a chance that he can grow into that backfield. But for me, I'm still not starting Chase Edmonds. If you're starting Chase Edmonds, you've got problems.
Jake, you were the only one who had Edmonds on the board. So is this Edmonds love, or is this just a fade of Green?
No, this is both, because when you can start Chase Edmonds is when it's going to be a pass happy situation. If you tell me there's any more potential pass happy situation than facing Seattle and what should be a shootout, that's why Chase Edmonds is going to do better than Kenny Drake this week.
Looks real good. Let's get to our next one. True or false, Antonio Brown will have a 100-yard game this season. As we mentioned at the top of the show, contract will become official on Monday. He's expected to join the lineup in Tampa Bay in Week 9 against the Saints. And we got a true times 3. We got a true from Ed, a true from Beller, and a false from Brandon. Brandon wants more FaceTime. All right, Brandon, why is he not going to get there? What's going to keep him from getting to 100 yards in a game?
Competition, maybe just the fact that we won't see him until Week 9, and then how quickly he's going to get up to full speed. And we've seen only one receiver so far go over 100 yards, but Mike Evans, kind of the big play guy there. I think that we'll see a lot of 60, 70, 80-yard games. But I just don't see him settling into a featured role. So that's where I'm at.
I'm going to guess that Antonio Brown will be a regular topic on pods and this show for a few weeks, so we're not going to go too much further than that for now. Let's get to our next question. For a half PPR league, in your flex spot, would you prefer to start Latavius Murray, Brandon Ayuk, or Michael Gallup? Interesting mix of names there. Yeah, that's a legitimately gross and difficult flex question. All right, got a couple Latavius Murray responses trickling in. Ed goes with Brandon Ayuk. Interesting. Okay, and then Beller's got.
Give us everyone then.
All right, we got to cover all here. Let's all right. Let's start with you, Beller. Why Michael Gallup?
Last week, 6 targets in Andy Dalton's first start for the Cowboys. One of them was in the end zone. Could have easily come down with the touchdown. People are wanting to say he should have. And the ball got on him kind of hot. I don't know if he should have. It was definitely a catchable ball, though. And again, I just believe that this quarterback and these receivers start to get a little bit more time with one another, that things are going to be on the same page enough to the point where we ultimately feel at least decent about having them in our lineups. And I like Latavius as the second play here. He has had at least 10 touches in every game this season, so that gives him a little bit higher of a floor. Latavius is the way to go in standard, but I still don't think that we should be outright fading Dallas's passing game. There's still too much talent there for this to totally fall off a cliff, and I think we're overreacting just a little bit to how ugly last week's game against the Cardinals was.
All right, Ed, you had Brandon Ayuk on your board. Make the case for Ayuk.
I'm still waiting for his big explosion. I think, he's literally a freak. He's got this wingspan, which doesn't make sense. The Vitruvian Man of Leonardo da Vinci's era, like his arms are way longer than he is tall. That doesn't happen to people. So, he's not normal. He's really fast. He's long. He's rangy. He can do anything. He's in a Kyle Shanahan offense. And let's be honest, Jimmy Garoppolo hasn't been himself, but he's had another week to get better. I think this is possibly a sort of game where Ayuk could break out and, it's all run after the catch stuff. Who else are you going to go with? Latavius Murray, who's basically a touchdown-dependent backup, or Michael Gallup, who's the 4th or 5th best offensive player on the Cowboys, who are rubbish anyway. So for me, Brandon, no question.
Saints are pretty big favorites today, guys. Brandon, Jake, you both had Latavius Murray. Jake, I'm curious, what kind of workload are you expecting for Murray in this game script?
Mostly because they also don't have any wide receivers left at this. Traquan Smith, as we talked about before, is their number one. I think you might get 10, 12 carries now for Latavius Murray, and at that chance, I'll take the upside of a touchdown.
All right.
And Carolina, one of the worst run defenses in
the worst since the middle of last season. Hasn't changed.
Got a quarterback question for you guys. Who would you rather have for the rest of the season? The previously mentioned Gardner Minshew, Jared Goff, or Joe Burrow?
Yes.
He was ready for that one. Good job drawing the arrow the right way, too,
Boom.
By the way. A lot of people get that wrong. We got a Joe Burrow, multiple marker colors. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys came prepared for this. We got a Goff, a Minshew, an arrow. Wow. I don't even know where to throw it next when you guys all give me something totally different. Jake, obviously you were in on Minshew there, so I'll let you start with your Minshew take.
I'll just go back to what I said earlier in the show. 19 points plus in all of one game, and actually those two 19-point games were almost 20. There's 19.5 or 6. You're going to give me 20 points in 5 out of 6 games with one bad game. You know how many quarterbacks don't have a bad game? Almost none. So Gardner Minshew. Stop with this stupid rumors crap.
All right, I got to throw it to Beller next. Use multiple colors to get that Joe Burrow answer, so I'm thoroughly impressed at the production work on your side. But what is it about Burrow that you like most the rest of the season?
Really close with Gardner Minshew for me, but what I like about Burrow is that this is a rookie, right? A guy in his first year, a guy who we have good reason to believe is only going to continue getting better, growing in the offense that he is in. The coaching staff getting more comfortable with him, his receivers and him getting a little bit more comfortable with one another. And I don't think we can undersell the a good game that we saw out of A.J. Green a week ago. Our Bengals beat reporter Jay Morrison wrote in our Beat Writer Roundtable this week that it had the feeling of the game before that when A.J. was maybe saying just trade me on the sideline as of a cleansing effect on him, on the entire offense, and then to see him bounce back, get 11 targets, catch 8 of them for 96 yards. I think you're looking at Joe Burrow having 3 really legitimate weapons in A.J. Green, Tyler Boyd, and T. Higgins. It's a team that is going to be trailing a lot. I don't think volume is going to be a concern for him, and Zach Taylor has proved to us he's going to let Joe Burrow drop back 45, 50 times in a game if the game script calls for it, and the game script is going to call for it quite a bit, I think, the rest of the season. So give me a bet on Joe Burrow getting better throughout his rookie year, Cincinnati remaining bad, volume and talent coming together to make him a low-end QB1, high-end QB2 the rest of the season.
All right, we got a question here from Jade for all of you in half-point PPR league. Hayden Hurst, Logan Thomas, or David
putting this on the board
for this week? Put it on the board. Yep.
Put it on the board. Yes.
That's pretty good, Hawk. That was I'll give you about a 5 out of 10 on that Hawk.
Where's my
Hawk doesn't deserve the hate that he gets, by the way, you guys. And you can see the Cubs thing over my shoulder. Hawk is an unfairly maligned announcer.
For all the baseball people, like the 3 that know what the hell we're talking about.
No idea what's going on.
Chicago White Sox.
Come on, Ed. You live in Chicago. No, you probably weren't there when Hawk Harrelson was there. That's fair. All right, so we got a few responses. We got an Njoku.
They're all different.
We got a Thomas. Yeah, you were on and Hayden Hurst down there.
I'm with Ed.
All right, so we got
there's
2
Vega.
Hurst. Ed, why Hayden Hurst?
I think the Falcons-Lions is one of the kind of potential slinging matches of the week. Stafford and Ryan, both terrible teams, both just hurling the ball wherever they can, probably behind, both of them losing at the same time, possibly. Who knows? So, yeah, Hayden Hurst, I think he's probably going to get a little bit more volume than those two. Logan Thomas has been one of those guys who he has had the volume this year, but I just couldn't play Logan Thomas in my team. It would just be too difficult for me to do. And David Njoku, there are 3 good tight ends in Cleveland, and I don't think he's just going to get any targets. If he gets 1 or 2, he's going to have to basically come down in the end zone with one of those to make him worthwhile. So for me, it's Hayden Hurst, then Logan Thomas probably second, and Njoku a distant third.
Yeah, we were at a point earlier in draft season. I thought Njoku was going to get traded, so I thought he made sense as a stash, and even Austin Hooper out this week. Still not a lock that he's going to completely dominate the target share at tight end. Plenty of receivers there as well.
Harrison Bryant.
Yeah, Harrison Bryant.
Yeah, the
playing
rookie.
a lot. He doesn't. It's just a thorn in the side of David Njoku at this point, at least. One more question for you guys. Flex in a PPR league, full PPR. Brashad Perriman or T.J. Hawkinson? Who do you like better for this week? I keep thinking about that Lions-Falcons matchup, too. That's going to be a lot of fun. The way Ed described it before, basically both teams losing the entire time. I want an early field goal, so then the team with the ball is always trailing. That way they keep the foot on the gas. All right, so we got Perriman, Hawk. We got a total split here. Okay. Brandon, why T.J. Hawkinson?
The matchup against the Falcons, and because the other guy that he's going against is a Jets receiver not named Jamison Crowder. So that's the big part of it. And, Perriman probably drawing Tre'Davious White. And I just loved Connor Hughes' answer this week on, does any Jet matter outside of Jamison Crowder? And Connor Hughes covers the Jets for The Athletic, and his answer was, in a word, no. And I completely agree with him. Sam Darnold matters because I have the Buffalo Bills defense on a couple teams, and I'm very excited about that.
Isn't that technically 4 words? In a word, no.
No, he just said no. Brandon was communicating it. Brandon's a conduit for Connor's information here.
Thanks for explaining me to Jake. Sometimes that's very helpful.
Yeah,
Sometimes
you got
it's
it. My
very
pleasure.
necessary. All right, well, let's move on to Brit's picks. So we're going to let a few of you guys catch a quick breather. And Ed, you made a ridiculously deep tight end call last week. Cole Kmet scoring.
Made 2 ridiculously deep tight end calls last week. Trey Burton as well. Let's not forget.
Well, Burton was at least on some people's radar.
Yeah.
But Kmet, in the first quarter too, he did it early.
He was always going to be in the game plan. Always going to be in the game plan. It was nice. It was nice to see. I think last week was pretty stinky, but looking at this week's slate, it's even stinkier. I'm afraid. Trying to find some players to pick up off the waiver wire ahead of these games. Not easy, but I've tried.
You want to start at the tight end position to do the tight end whisperer? I mean, we might as well just begin
you know what we're going to go for? We're going to go for Tyler Kroft this week. Why are we going for Tyler Kroft this week? Well, as you might know, Dawson Knox is out. I can't remember if he tested positive for COVID or if he was near someone who had COVID. But at the same time, Tyler Kroft was out with his wife or significant other who was having a baby. And Dawson Knox was in meeting rooms with Lee Smith and the other tight ends of the Buffalo Bills, who are now also out because of COVID. So Tyler Kroft is the last man standing in the Bills tight end room. They're playing against the Jets. And it all just comes together nicely for maybe, between 6 and 13 points today.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, the whole tight end room unavailable. So Tyler Kroft should get a few more targets than usual. Are you on that one, Jake? You think that's a good call?
I have Tyler Crawford at 18. He's right behind Logan Thomas, Hurst, and Ebron. So, yeah, I think he's a nice streaming option. As you mentioned, the only one where I will have my only concern is because he's the only one that you might see a lot of 11 with Gabriel Davis in place of John Brown, and that means Tyler Croft might be blocking some. So I think that range that Ed mentioned was a good range to expect, possibly the low end, but the upside is there if he scores.
Yeah, there's a lot of love for Gabriel Davis at his price in the DFS community this week. Let's shift the focus over to the wide receiver position, Ed, who kind of stands out to you as a widely available wide receiver that you could maybe pick up and play.
I was trying to talk myself into Brashad Perriman, but playing any Jets in fantasy is a bit like finding some moldy cheese in the fridge and like trying to work out if you can cut off the bad bits and eat it. Like up against Tre'Davious White, I just couldn't do it. So one of my kind of weird streamers, whenever there's a Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver injured, I like Demarcus Robinson. I think he's got incredible hands. He's obviously a big guy. He's fast as hell. He gets looks from Patrick Mahomes like frequently. And Demarcus Robinson was in pretty good shape last week, and I like him this week. He's much less tilting than going for Mecole Hardman, who always seems to have one of those annoying games if you ever put him in your team. So I'm going to Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah, coming off of a game in which conditions were awful. They get bad conditions again this week, but you got to think that the targets Robinson gets at least puts him in the fray. I'm curious, Jake, where did Robinson finish up this week in your rankings?
53rd. He's right around AJ Green, Marvin Jones, Ayuk, Ruggs, people like that. I probably would have had him a little bit higher if not for the weather. But as we mentioned earlier at the top of the show, once you get snow and the temperature under 35, which is supposed to be like teens, low 20s, I have a little bit of concern for the passing game. I feel like Demarcus Robinson is going to get touchdown or bust this week. But I do like Demarcus Robinson. I mean, the fact that he's 53rd, he's in front of guys like Damiere Byrd and Dontrell Inman.
Yeah, definitely playable in that range. Let's get to some running backs, Ed. Is there any running back off the wire that you really like? Maybe it's someone we already talked about earlier in the show since so much value opened up at the position over the last couple days.
Well, I was just looking, and the position's pretty barren on the waiver wire. You know, if you're looking at the waiver wire today, honestly, you could find maybe a handcuff, and that's about it. So Brian Hill or Tony Pollard, who I managed to pick up today as a Zeke owner, is great. But really, there's very few exciting plays out there. If anything, I have a question for Jake is I've got Melvin Gordon against Kansas City coming off an injury, or David Montgomery, who's playing against the Rams on Monday night. Which way would you go with that?
Montgomery, and easy.
You like the volume?
It's the volume. I don't like David Montgomery. I don't like 10 rushing yards or 10 carries for 30 rushing yards, essentially 2 games in a row. But because we have no Tariq Cohen, he's the passing game option as well. Yeah, his volume. I have Montgomery right alongside Kenyon Drake and Antonio Gibson because they kind of all feel like that same range of options.
Yeah, Montgomery seems so safe volume-wise, at least until Lamar Miller gets into the fold. And if that never happens, then Miller just gets volume each and every week.
To make the cheese comparison, it's like David Montgomery is like you open the fridge, you want to put like something really nice on your hamburger, and all you have is like a Kraft single. There you go.
It gets it done, but yeah, you don't feel great about it. All right, let's get to the quarterback position, Ed. How about a quarterback from the wire that you like this week?
Matt Stafford for me. It's that game again. It's the Lions-Falcons game. I think Jake has got him a little bit lower than consensus in his rankings. I'd probably have him a little bit higher than consensus. Kind of the opposite of Jake and Minshew this week. So yeah, for me, Matt Stafford, I think the whole matchup looks great. Golladay is back, and Golladay is actually looking healthy as well. And I think that's massive because I don't really like Marvin Jones or any of the other options that he has to throw to. Hawkinson, we'll see what he can do. But Kenny Golladay, Matt Stafford, and a game where you could be coming from behind, just to me spells like slinging it, touchdowns, all the stuff I want to see today.
So he flipped the question on me, so I'll flip a question on him because my concern with Stafford is he has to do it all with his arm. So you said Minshew, fine. You know, Minshew's at 9, Stafford's at 10. But what about Herbert at 8? Would you go Herbert or would you go Stafford?
Who are the Chargers playing today?
They are playing at Jacksonville at home. Minshew versus Herbert today.
The thing I like about Herbert is he has underrated rushing upside. Like it's not against him to rush in a touchdown. I think he's probably going to go for like 30 to 48 yards or something on the ground as well. So like, I don't hate Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert or Matt Stafford, like it's really a pick your poison sort of thing. Depends on what you need. I think that Stafford is probably more high variance, but Herbert might have a higher floor just with those rushing points.
It's a real problem that I think a decent number of people actually have. He played the weight on the quarterback game. He easily could have fallen into a decision like that here in Week 7. Ed, great stuff as always. Enjoy Week 7.
Great to see you.
It's Ed Mallion, the latest installment of Brits Picks. It's also the time of the show that we say goodbye to Jake. And Jake, before we let you go, any other thoughts about this Week 7 slate?
No, I already updated while we were doing the show. I was multitasking with my 14 list of rankings, and I updated Aaron Jones. And Jamal Williams jumped to RB13, sandwiched between David Johnson and Josh Jacobs.
Wow, RB13. Yeah, that's why he's going to be chalky in DFS, right? A lot of volume, great matchup, as we talked about a little bit earlier. All right, Jake, enjoy Week 7. We appreciate your insight as always. Looking forward to doing this again with you next week.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's what I have to say. That's what it says on the script. That's Jake Seeley, the All-In Kid. Get all of his updated rankings, his waiver column, the APA matchups we talked about, everything you need to win your fantasy football league for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. All right, we're going to move on to our injury segment. And to do that, we're going to bring on Virginia Zakas from Inside Injuries. It's another messy injury report this week. Virginia, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Let's start with Aaron Jones. He showed up on the injury report with a calf strain late in the week. We got the word that he is sitting out today. So I think the question a lot of people have is, how long is he going to be down, and how much might this injury impact him once he eventually returns?
So I'm really glad actually that he's not playing today. He underwent an MRI after injuring his calf in the middle of the week, and it showed a mild strain. So that's good news, nothing too serious. But calf strains are really easy to aggravate. So if he were to play today, he would have risked making it far worse. But the good news is right now, because it's a mild strain, our algorithm is showing a 2-week optimal recovery time. Still don't necessarily think he should play next week because, again, it's really easy to aggravate these injuries. But if he sits this week and next week as well, then I think he'll be good to go after that. Our algorithm has him in the high-risk category right now. If he plays next week, he'll still be in that high-risk category. And his health performance factor, which is our metric to predict a player's performance, is sitting at 50%, which is below average. And it'll still be below average next week as well. But again, if he waits 2 weeks, I think he'll be good to go after that.
Yeah, fortunately for the Packers, they have good running back depth. Maybe they can lean into that a little bit, give Jones that time. And they have been a pretty conservative staff as far as letting players take the time they need to get back from injuries. We've seen that with Devontae Adams in recent years. Let's talk about Michael Thomas. He's now dealing with an ankle injury and a hamstring injury. Is this a case where maybe he pushed himself to come back a little bit too quickly? He's obviously not going to play this week, but when do you think we're going to see Michael Thomas back and at 100% again?
Yeah, so of course he started with that high ankle sprain in week 1. It sounds like he was close to fully recovered when he was supposed to play in week 5 before he was benched for disciplinary reasons. And then he just suffered this hamstring injury. For him, his optimal recovery time is 2 to 3 weeks, which means we also don't think he should play next week. I don't necessarily think this was a compensatory injury because ankle sprains don't typically result in hamstring strains. But he did miss over a month, so I wouldn't be surprised if he just tried to do too much too fast, and his body just wasn't ready to go, full speed and be 100% at practice. So definitely the right decision for him to sit this week, and should sit next week as well because these soft tissue muscular strains are so easy to aggravate.
Now, in your column this week, you suggested that Joe Mixon could also miss Week 8, that he should miss Week 8, and then the Bengals, of course, have a bye in Week 9. So if they do follow that, do you trust him to come back and be 100% healthy Joe Mixon coming out of that bye week?
Yeah, so I was looking at our algorithm's projections today. Right now, he's a high injury risk, poor health performance factor. Not a surprise at all. Foot sprains are really tough to play through, especially as a running back. If he returns next week, he's going to be slightly better, still high injury risk, but below average health performance factor. Now, if he waits until week 10, his health performance factor will be in that above average to peak category, which is very good. So the best decision for him is going to be to sit through that bye week, give himself a full month for his foot sprain to heal. And if he does that, I think he'll be good to go. Shouldn't have any lingering effects of this injury. But a week 8 return is probably going to be pushing it.
Let's talk about Baker Mayfield. He has been dealing with a rib injury. How much do you think that's been impacting his performance these last few weeks, especially?
Yeah, so he underwent X-rays on his ribs, which were negative, likely just dealing with bruised ribs, maybe some bruised cartilage, which can be really painful for a few weeks. But at this point, I don't really think it's something that should be impacting his performance. Now, one thing that they didn't really touch on and haven't reported is a shoulder injury. But on that same play, if you watched how he reacted right after, he seemed to be kind of dangling his arm to the side a little bit. And based on how he fell, I'm concerned that he also suffered a mild AC sprain to his throwing shoulder, which would be at this point a bigger concern than the chest injury. Right now, he's probably dealing with a little lingering soreness, might still need to wear some extra padding around his chest today to protect it. But I think he'll play a lot better today. But again, we need to keep an eye on that shoulder as well as the chest injury for the next week or so. After that, I think he should be in the clear.
Yeah, he looked really uncomfortable throughout that game last week. Let's talk about Juju Smith-Schuster for a moment. Just a little earlier, Jake said he thinks Juju's just done at age 23, but he's been on the injury report pretty much all season. When you see it, it seems like it's always a knee injury. What's going on with Juju? Is he being physically limited by this injury? Is it simply a usage thing? Like, how much of a role is health playing in this disappointing season that we're seeing from him?
Yeah, I definitely think his knee injury has a little bit to do with it. The last 3 weeks, he's missed practice on Wednesday. The weeks before that, he missed, I think, 2 practices each week. So that's not something you ever want to see. He is getting in full practices by the end of the week, which is good, but he's clearly not 100%. This is one of those times where a guy is trying to tough it out and be out there for his team, but he's really just lengthening his recovery. Had he just missed a game early on when he was originally hurt at the beginning of the season, he would be 100% perfectly fine by now. I think we'd see, a lot more explosive plays from him. But right now, I think his knee is just holding him back a little bit. His health performance factor has moved back into that above average category. He's at 68% right now, which is a lot better than he's looked in recent weeks. So hopefully he's turning the corner. But his injury risk still remains high. So it won't take much for him to tweak his knee, and then he'll kind of be starting back over at zero, which is obviously not what we want to see. But I'm hoping if he can make it through the next few weeks without any setbacks, hopefully in the second half of the season, we'll see a much more exciting and explosive player.
It's just really unfortunate, too. They don't have a bye week coming up for him to get that rest that he seems to really need at this point in the season. Virginia, thanks for taking the time to join us today. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
Thanks. Good to be here.
That's Virginia Zakas from Inside Injuries. Give her a follow on Twitter at @VZakas and at Inside Injuries. Be sure to check out InsideInjuries.com and check out her columns at The Athletic. Again, theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Just $1 a month. You get Virginia's columns each week along with all of Jake's stuff too. Tons of good stuff each and every week. Let's bring back Brandon Funston and Michael Beller. We'll take a few questions here from you, our viewers. A lot of those rolling in. This one comes from the Twilight Assassin. LaMichael Pirine or Frank Gore? Oh, no. We got to go to that Jets backfield. All right, Beller, what are you doing with that Jets backfield?
This is actually pretty simple for me. If it's just about floor, if you need someone to give you 6-7 points, Gore is the play here. He's going to have the volume most likely. If you're shooting for upside, you're hoping someone's going to break a big play for you. If you really need that, Pirine's the play here. This is just a really ugly backfield, and I would love to see Pirine get the Frank Gore treatment and get all of Frank Gore's carries, or be the lead guy at least, have them flip roles. Until that's the case, that's really how we're going to be looking at this backfield. And the big overlying thing here is that you only want to play either of these guys if you're desperate.
Yeah, absolute desperation plays. Why don't the Jets understand that you should see what Pirine gives you to determine if he's a big part of your future or
Adam
not?
Gase.
Gase gonna Gase.
Why don't the Jets understand they need to change their head coach?
Why don't they just let him go and be first in line for Eric Bieniemy? That would be the smart thing to do, so the Jets will not do that. Nicholas wants to know, is it crazy to have Adams, Williams, and Tanyan all in the same lineup this week, Brandon?
I don't think it's crazy. I mean, I always say you don't think about stacks and different things like that. You're just going to judge every player in a vacuum. And, I have those guys all decently ranked. And I'm with Jake. I actually have Jamal Williams. I had moved him up to 13 when he announced that he had moved Jamal Williams to 13. So I'm right there with him. You're obviously not benching Devontae Adams, and tight end has been such a mess that Robert Tanyan's as good a play after the top, couple guys that are just, the slam dunk plays. Tanya's as good as anybody. So in a vacuum, all those guys look like fine plays.
Yeah, Tanya, part of the second-tier glob at tight end right now. I think that's the proper
I like
scientific
that,
term. Connor, in a 12-team half PPR league, wants to know, pick 2 for the flex spot, Jared Cook, James White, or Michael Gallup. I'll throw this one to you first, Beller.
I'm going to go White and Gallup here. I feel like I'm higher on Gallup than most people are this week. White's a pretty easy one. I think that's the non-controversial one in this group of 3. Again, I've said it a few times. I think we are overreacting a little bit to Dallas's performance last week when we look at these receivers. For me, the bigger concern with Gallup is what he was pre-Dak injury rather than what this offense is right now. But Jared Cook is such a hit-or-miss kind of guy, and even with Michael Thomas out of the lineup, that remains true. In general, unless we're talking about Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Darren Waller, someone along those lines, I'm going to lead toward a receiver over a tight end, and that's where we find ourselves here. I think there's a decent bounce back coming for this Dallas offense. It might not happen right away this week, but I think over the next couple of weeks and over the long term of the rest of the season, they're going to be a lot better than what we saw against Arizona last week.
All right, we got a question here from Kevin G. Who do you like more in a half PPR this week? Allen Robinson facing Ramsey or Terry McLaurin facing Rain? What do you think, Brandon?
I'd rather face Rain than Ramsey, and I think Terry McLaurin. I'm not going to sweat the Rain too much. And Terry McLaurin is just such a standout go-to guy in this offense. Kyle Allen back there is not afraid to just, do the Brett Favre grip it and rip it, throw the ball, take risks. You got the Dallas Cowboys, and no matter who Terry McLaurin goes up against among the corners there, it doesn't matter. It's a good matchup for Terry McLaurin. So give me McLaurin.
All right, Rio's looking for help replacing Aaron Jones. JaMycal Hasty or Jeff Wilson if you're dipping into that backfield depth in San Francisco? What do you think, Beller?
I'll go Hasty here just because of the big playability that he has. I think he's got a line on being involved in this offense a little bit more than Wilson does. And we saw it last week. I mean, they must like what they see. They've been seeing from Hasty. The fact that he had as much of a role in the game last week as he did, can only believe that that's going to play to his benefit here today. I feel as though he's going to have a larger role in the offense than Jeff Wilson. And really, when we're reaching this deep and we're talking about guys who are going to be serving in some sort of backup complementary capacity anyways, you want to bet on the role. And to me, it seems like Hasty's got the better role in the offense right now.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case at this point as you look at how things stack up there in San Francisco. 37, Iggy Fenton wants to know in a PPR league, Bell, Singletary, or Lindsey. What do you think, Brandon?
I'm going to go volume play here. I'm going to go Devin Singletary, still the clear lead. Zach Moss is working his way back in, but it's volume. And so Devin Singletary, the only number 1 guy here. And it's also matchup. The Jets have been a good matchup for fantasy running back. So between those two things, I think you have to go Singletary there.
All right. Hey, I'm with you on Singletary. Nice line favoring the Bills in that matchup against the Jets. Should get plenty of work today. We've got a great shootout lined up. Lots of fantasy goodness between the Lions and the Falcons. So to dive into that, we're going to bring in our Lions beat writer, Chris Burke. Chris, good morning. Welcome to the show. How's it going today?
Hey, doing all right. I got to spend some time updating the background here if I'm going to be on anymore. little plane behind me. But how you guys doing?
Doing well. I had to build a flea market thing behind me to kind of catch up
like
to Jake and these guys. So it's coming together. But just turn the bookcase, throw a few books in there, and you're good to go.
Yeah. All right.
Let's start with this Lions backfield. How do you see DeAndre Swift and Adrian Peterson sort of splitting this workload kind of this week against the Falcons, but even beyond, looking at what we saw just a week ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we saw last week is it's going to be what they want it to be moving forward to some extent. I don't think DeAndre Swift's ever going to be a 25, 30 touch per game guy. Even going back to Kerryon Johnson's rookie year when he was going pretty well, I think he maxed out at 21 or 22 touches. So I think that's probably the window for Swift. And they really do trust Adrian Peterson. So it's going to be kind of game script specific. If they're up, Peterson's probably going to be their guy. And early on, Peterson's probably going to be their guy. So I think it's going to continue to be their 1-2 punch for them as long as it's working. But the one thing that we didn't see from Swift last week that I think we have seen before already with the Lions is that he can catch the ball out of the backfield really well. So if they can balance that out for him a little bit more, I think that might be a goal.
Yeah, that'd be huge. It would continue to prop up his value on a week-to-week basis if they get him involved that way consistently. Fantasy owners always want to kind of point the blame at somebody. Is this maddening usage of the running backs? Is this a Matt Patricia thing, or is it a Darrell Bevel thing?
I think it's mostly a Matt Patricia thing. I think he really, really wants this team to be able to mix and match every week, depending on who they're going up against. And so even, the Green Bay game this year, we saw a lot of Kerryon Johnson, and they just feel like certain guys have better matchups against certain defenses, for better or worse. But, I don't know how much you put on Darrell Bevell. I think most of it's coming from the top down. I do think that, again, they want to mix Peterson in there because he gives a different look than DeAndre Swift. And so maybe you can catch a defense with the wrong personnel out there if you get Swift on the field. Maybe you get him some more advantageous looks if you're in 2nd and 5 as opposed to, 1st and 10 or whatever it is. But I think that this is their goal, that they want to be a 2-3 back team. I mean, we've seen it for however many years in New England that, you're going to kind of go week to week with this thing.
Let's talk about the pass catchers. Behind Kenny Golladay, TJ Hawkinson showing some flashes, very touchdown dependent the last couple of weeks, but could he emerge to be the true number 2 in this offense behind Golladay? Could he be featured enough for that? Or do you see Marvin Jones or Quintez Cephas or someone else emerging to kind of be more of a 2A, 2B in that battle for targets behind Golladay?
Yeah, I mean, I think he certainly could. I think we'll see Marvin Jones, get a little more involved than he has been the past couple weeks, and I do think they'll get Cephas or Swift involved too. Sorry, so that's 2-3 guys that you've got taking looks away from T.J. Hawkinson. It was interesting to hear Darrell Bevell talk this week about Hawkinson. They said the one thing that they really want to see from him is him get better creating separation, and I think that sort of goes. That's a critique both of Hawkinson and of the play calling itself, because at the start of the year, they were using him in motion. They were doing some things to really get him open in different ways and kind of pressure the linebackers. Haven't seen that as much the last couple of weeks, so kind of curious to see if they might do it again here in Atlanta. The good thing, and I think sort of the hint that he's still going to be a big part of this, is that Matthew Stafford keeps looking for him in the red zone, even when he's not getting a lot of looks elsewhere. So he's still a guy that they trust quite a bit, and I think you would expect to just kind of naturally ramp up as we go through this season.
But Chris, this is a really soft part of the schedule for the Lions. They got the Falcons today, the Colts next week, you got the Vikings, you got Washington, Carolina, and Houston all on tap within the next 6 weeks. Do you see this team starting to click a little more offensively? Because it just seems like Matthew Stafford really hasn't been himself yet, and they're still kind of finding their identity on that side of the ball. I mean, could this be a team that we're talking about around Thanksgiving as one of the hottest teams in the league?
I mean, it's always a gamble to assume the Lions are going to get on a hot streak, I think. But at least offensively, I think last week it looked better. And that's part of that's going up against Jacksonville. But I think Matthew Stafford looked more confident and more comfortable last week. For whatever reason, maybe it's just the lengthy time off. He missed the second half of last year. Those first 4 games of the year, he looked a lot more unsteady, a lot more rattled in the pocket than we've seen him in recent years. And I thought he got back to normal in week 6. So I think moving forward, you'll see him play a little better. And again, they're still trying to figure out exactly what they've got in Hawkinson coming back from his injury last year and what they've got in Swift. So it should settle down. The Lions been playing pretty well, even though they've been mixing and matching parts up there. So I do think the offense can get hot. The question for wins and losses for them really comes down to whether or not the defense can hold up its end.
Yeah, big concerns with that defense. No Desmond Trufant this week against the Falcons. How much are the Lions going to get picked apart by Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones this week, given the state of this defense?
Yeah, and I can almost guarantee Matt Patricia's worried about Todd Gurley too, and I think that's kind of curiosity with that defense and with the approach that they've had is that even when they face really good passing attacks, that seems to be their number one priority. Either the running back or the threat of the quarterback running is kind of tops in their mind. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to load up and slow down the run again and then sort of see where that leaves them. They don't have a great answer for the passing attack. The pass rush got going a little bit in Jacksonville, but it's not even really a good pass rush. So Matt Ryan's going to have some time back there unless they dial up some blitzes. But if you blitz, you're obviously leaving your guys out on an island. And that's Amani Oruwariye and Jeff Okudah are mostly going to draw those matchups with Jones and Ridley. I would guess it's going to be Oruwariye on Jones as much as they can because I think Okudah matches up skill set wise better with Ridley than Oruwariye does. But either way, that's going to be a tough matchup. And again, I think it goes back to the run game and them kind of going week to week. I wouldn't be shocked if this is a pretty heavy Adrian Peterson script early on, just because they want to really control the ball, control the clock, kind of get the game on their terms as much as they can.
maybe play at a slow pace and just keep Atlanta's offense off
Yep.
the field. You saw a lot of Travis Fulgham last year covering this team, and he had this breakout with the Eagles. Were there flashes of Travis Fulgham maybe having this sort of ceiling that we've seen from him with the move to Philadelphia?
Not to this extent, and that's another spot. It's been kind of interesting to hear these coaches talk about him. Darrell Bevell said he was really surprised Travis Fulgham has blown up like that. He said, he was okay for us, but that was about as far as it went, and their wide receivers coach said pretty much the same thing. So I don't think that they were expecting him to go somewhere else and become this playmaker, this type of game changer he's been. He did show flashes. I mean, he looked like a guy that you'd want to develop behind Marvin Jones and Kenny Galladay, because he did some things for their offense in the preseason and in training camp that looked a lot like what those guys do, being able to win in tight windows, being able to stretch the field vertically. So he looked like a fit. I'm also, it made sense that they kind of squeezed him out if he was going to be their seventh receiver. They already have, Quintez Cephas is inactive today for the second straight week because he's their sixth guy. So that's a spot where they're really deep. It didn't come as a huge shock when he got released, but I think there were hints that he could be a good receiver down the line. I don't know that anyone expected it to click as quickly as it has.
Yeah, I don't think the Lions are the only team to cut him loose either, so it's not like
Right,
they were
yeah.
missing something that everybody else apparently could see. One really hard-hitting question before we let you go. What's your favorite Halloween candy, Chris?
This is a Kit Kat household, I think. I'm also the guy who's going to swoop in and take the Laffy Taffy stuff that no one else wants. I'm happy to go and eat those too. So, we'll take whatever anyone has. We're pretty wide open over here.
Yeah, Laffy Taffy is a little underrated, I think.
Yeah, it's a sneaky pick, I think.
Well, thanks for the time and the insight this morning, Chris. Enjoy Week 7.
Thanks.
That's Chris Burke. He covers the Lions for The Athletic. You can get all of his written coverage along with all of our fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. Let's talk about a few players we like for Jock Market this week. Be sure to go to the App Store now. The Android app is coming soon. You start making money this week. We will bring on Michael Beller to break it all down for us. Beller, as people know, the goal here is to find underpriced and undervalued players in the rankings. So who do you like this week on Jock Market?
I'm going to start out at wide receiver. If you've been watching for a while here, you're probably not surprised. Then I'm going to go to a Dallas Cowboy. How about CeeDee Lamb? All right, the sky is falling. Everything's going so poorly in Dallas. What are they going to do? What can we trust CeeDee Lamb? Can we trust Amari Cooper? Well, in this horrible, no good game for Andy Dalton last week, he threw the ball to CeeDee Lamb 11 times, caught 7 of them for 64 yards. And this is like the game that is making everyone so concerned about the Dallas passing game, CeeDee Lamb included. What we like here is that with so many popular receivers today, with all these high over-under games, CeeDee Lamb is going to be ignored to an extent that we probably haven't seen since week 1, Derek. So I think you're going to be able to get in on him very cheaply. And still, I mean, if we're talking about 7-11, 64 as a sky is falling sort of game for CeeDee Lamb, then we feel pretty dang good about him in general, and again, about what the Dallas offense can still do, even after what we saw a week ago. I like the offense overall for a little bit of a bounce back against Washington, but CeeDee Lamb doesn't need a rising tide to lift his ship. He can do it quite a bit on his own. He already did it last week. I think he has himself another good game here in Week 7.
You and I spoke about this Week 7 slate from a DFS perspective at the end of the week on the Athletic Fantasy Football Podcast. And one of the games that I think I like more than most, and I think you're on board with this too, is the Steelers-Titans matchup. The over-under in that game is at 51. The Titans are only 1-point favorites. You got a nice, pretty high-scoring game with a tight point spread. Who do you like in that game as being maybe overlooked here in Week 7?
Yeah, I think I like, really everyone in this game. I think the offenses are going to show up, and I think this is maybe the best game that we have to date in the NFL. Two teams that we wouldn't be surprised to see meeting in the AFC Championship game a few months from now. But I just can never go against James Conner. The volume is there for him every single week. I mean, we're looking at 3 weeks already, or 4 weeks, this year, where he's had at least 15 carries. He's had at least 18 opportunities, meaning carries plus targets in those same 4 games. The one game that he didn't way back in week 1 when he got hurt mid-game. And it was the only time that he came up short of those 18 opportunities. 3 100-yard games on the ground this season, 4 games finding the end zone. James Conner is just continually overlooked. He does not get the respect that he deserves as, I think, one of the best running backs in the NFL. And definitely, right, when we talk about these workhorse backs, these do-it-all backs, we understandably talk about guys like Alvin Kamara and like Saquon Barkley and like Ezekiel Elliott and Christian McCaffrey and Dalvin Cook and all sorts of guys like that. Well, James Conner, at least from a do-it-all perspective, at least from an ownership of his own backfield perspective, absolutely belongs in that conversation. And he's in it sometimes, but he should be in it all the time. We're putting him in it today for sure. Another guy who feels as though there could be some overlookedness happening here because of the fact that he doesn't get that same sort of respect and a belief in this Titans defense that really hasn't lived up to that. It's been the offense that's been carrying the 5-0 Titans, not the defense. So as you said, Derek, both you and I think this is going to be a higher scoring game than people expect, and Connor's going to have a big role to play in that.
Yeah, just two teams that the market seems to be a little bit wrong about. Like the identities are a little bit confused for both the Steelers and the Titans at this point. A lot of interest in Alvin Kamara this week with that matchup against Carolina with no Michael Thomas, and for good reason. I think there's actually a lot of value on the other side of that game, especially if you think the Saints offense is going to do damage and put up 28-plus points. Carolina's going to be running a lot of plays trying to keep pace. So who do you like in that Carolina offense this week?
I like DJ Moore. I like Robbie Anderson also. Robbie Anderson, I think, is rightly the number one receiver in that offense, viewed as the number one receiver is what I mean to say. But DJ Moore's had 2 93-yard games in a row here, Derek, and he was 2 near misses against Chicago last week away from a monster game in that one. One that was just a straight-up outright drop that catches for at least 50 yards on that play. Another one that was catchable, it was a little bit behind him, it was the last play of the game, or the last play of Carolina's second to last drive that would have extended things and made things a whole lot more interesting in that one. It was catchable, it was behind him, but that was another one that he was about a half catch away from another 30-yard gain there. And so we could be talking coming a 150-yard game against one of the best pass defenses in the NFL in the Chicago Bears. So even if he is faced up with someone like Janoris Jenkins, someone like Marcus Lattimore, it's going to be, I think, a decent game for him. And I think he's more likely going to see a lot of P.J. Williams on the other side of the field from him, the guy who scares you the least in that New Orleans secondary. So I really do like DJ Moore. We're seeing him, there have been too many things where we have had new receivers, new quarterbacks stepping into these situations, new head coaches, and we're ready to write them off. We saw it with Brooke Cooks. Maybe just a little bit of time to get going with Deshaun Watson. I think we're seeing the same with DJ Moore, Teddy Bridgewater, Matt Rule, and we're finally starting to get him into a position where we feel good about him going into this week.
All right, let's talk about the Atlanta-Detroit matchup. We just spoke to Chris Burke from The Athletic a few minutes ago. That game has all the makings of a shootout. So if you're trying to find some value on Jock Market this week from Falcons-Lions, where do you go?
Yeah, Matthew Stafford. I mean, this Atlanta defense has stopped no quarterback right all season long. This is going to be a passing game, I think, that thrives. And again, a great situation with the Detroit passing game when you compare it against some of these other teams. This is a great spot in Jock Market because people are going to be all over Russell Wilson. People are going to be all over Kyler Murray. It's totally understandable why you would be all over guys like that. Deshaun Watson in what feels like a good matchup against the Green Bay Packers. On the other side of that game, Aaron Rodgers going up against a very soft Houston defense. It is going to be a situation where there's a lot of focus on a small group of quarterbacks, and it is going to be very easy and understandable for people to overlook Matthew Stafford, but he should be able to thrive against an Atlanta defense that, again, has stopped no one through the air. I keep back is Nick Foles relieving Mitch Trubisky in week 3 and throwing for 188 yards and 3 touchdowns in about a quarter and a half. That is, of course, an extreme situation, but you put that up against everything else Atlanta has done against quarterbacks this year, and it gives you all the faith in the world that we're going to see a big game out of Matthew Stafford today. He's the one quarterback I think who's going to have the biggest gap between how much attention he gets and the production that he gets, and that is exactly what we're looking for in the Jock marketplace.
All right, plenty of options across all different positions that can help you out on Jock Market this week. You can take control of your fantasy experience and download Jock Market now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. Let's get to a few questions here. Let's bring back Brandon Funston to help answer them as well. We got a question from ZonkeyGoose707, Jerick McKinnon or Giovanni Bernard. What do you think, Brandon?
I think Giovanni Bernard's the safer play. I actually have Jerick McKinnon ranked a little higher, and I was a little bit shocked that McKinnon went away almost completely when Raheem Mostert came back, because I thought McKinnon was making plays and looking really good. He's, I think Beller said earlier this week, doesn't have the burst, but he looks a little more powerful. I think there's a better combination of physicality and still enough burst there that with Mostert out, I'm feeling like McKinnon's going to be the lead guy, and maybe Jermichael Hasty will be mixed in as well. But you want the San Francisco lead running back, and I feel like that's going to be McKinnon this week. And for that reason, I will take McKinnon just a slightly ahead of Gio Bernard.
All right, SP writes in with a question: Swift or Gibson, floor versus ceiling in a half PPR league today? What do you think, Beller?
I'm going to go DeAndre Swift here. I think we got to take the Lions a little bit at face value with the way they used DeAndre Swift last week and the fact that we know he's the best back. He's the most talented back as it stands right now in that offense. So I think we're going to see his role at the very least be something akin to what it was last week when he got the 14 carries, turned it into 116 and 2 touchdowns. That 116 and 2, that's not always going to be there. That's going to be a little bit big play dependent and a little bit inside the 5-yard line usage dependent. But what you like here is a bettable role. And I think we're seeing that role for DeAndre Swift increase as the weeks go by. I'm still just a little bit worried about Antonio Gibson's floor because of the fact that J.D. McKissic has proven himself a very useful receiving back, and we want our backs to be getting that work in the receiving game, especially in any league that's going to be counting points for receptions, and he's just not going to get it, not because he can't, but because McKissic has been very good in that role for Washington. So it's a combination of believing in Swift and just being a little bit concerned about Gibson's usage in the passing game.
All right, got a question from Brown Blue. Please pick 2 from these 3 running backs in a full PPR league: James Robinson, Josh Jacobs, and Antonio Gibson. A lot of Antonio Gibson questions. He's getting work, Brandon. He's getting plenty of touches. We're talking 15 touches per game right now. And even with McKissic doing more in the passing game, like Beller just said, we've seen 5 targets per week each of the last 3 weeks now for Antonio Gibson. So they're kind of both doing it in that facet of the game.
Yeah, I think as far as a ceiling, this is a good week for Antonio Gibson. I just don't. You look at him compared to James Robinson and Josh Jacobs, so the volume's just not there, and the touchdown upside for Robinson and Jacobs is much better. And Jacobs matchup's tough, but he's so integrally involved in that offense now, and they're getting involved in the passing game as well. I think you just have to follow the volume here and go James Robinson and Josh Jacobs, but I don't discount Antonio Gibson at all having a big week.
All right, let's move on to my favorite segment of the week. Actually, I think the whiteboard segment became my favorite this week, but the fantasy fill in the blank. I'm going to throw questions to you guys. You're going to fill in the blanks, and we'll alternate these. Let's go first to you, Beller. In a PPR league, I have DJ Chark and Kenyon Drake. I should start blank.
Both, if you can. Obviously, the way this question is framed says we can only go with one. I am going to lean ever so slightly toward Kenyon Drake. And again, it's the same discussion we get into a lot when we're talking about a good running back against a good receiver. It's about the floor. It's about the guaranteed volume. Kenyon Drake has that. We keep wanting to write him out of the offense and Chase Edmonds into it, but Cliff Kingsbury doesn't want to do that. And that's really the only person who matters in this discussion. So I will go with Kenyon Drake. It would break my heart to sit DJ Chark, though. So I would try to find a way to get both those guys into the lineup.
Yeah, it's a really tough call if you got to choose between those two. Next one, over under Jeff Smith fantasy points in PPR leagues this week. Where would you set that number, Brandon?
Not where. Did you give me a number? I'm seeing it on the show sheet at 8.5. I'm not going that high. Look at Perryman, Braxton Berrios, Denzel Mims, Jeff Smith. I just think it could go any different direction, and there's not going to be a lot to go with Sam Darnold against the Buffalo Bills. I just don't want to have any piece of this Jets offense, and so I don't want to steer someone towards Jeff Smith by taking the over here. I think the safe play here is to take the under.
I think the 8.5 being on the rundown is a sign that our producer, Nando DeFino, has some Jeff Smith rookie cards that he's been sitting on that he's hoping are going to pop up in value.
Jake threw out a don't forget about Jeff Smith, warning earlier. And so I think Nando might have grabbed that and run with it.
Got a little excited about it.
He did. Let's get to the next one. Baker Mayfield will pass for blank yards in week 7. We'll throw this one back to you, Brandon.
He will throw for, it's going to be one of his better. I'll say 267. They're going to be able to run the ball a lot, and I think that'll open up play action, open up the passing game. I don't think it's going to go big time because, again, I think the emphasis here is going to be on the running game, but I think it's going to be a more efficient, kind of a nice, 267, 2-touchdown kind of game for Baker Mayfield.
I want to throw this one to you too, Beller. What do you think about Mayfield this week?
Yeah, I had 249 as the number in my head. It's about right where he was against Cincinnati the first time these two teams got together. He actually got out to a really hot start in that game, and then they dialed it back, leaned on Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt back in week 2. Obviously, they're not going to be able to lean on Nick Chubb today, but I still think this is a decent enough matchup for the Cleveland offense that we're going to see a better game out of Baker than we are used to seeing. The problem, as we know, this is a very run-heavy offense, one of the run-heaviest offenses in the league. So even if it's a game where Baker does get going, they're still not going to want to get away from the run game. We're going to see a lot of Kareem Hunt usage in this one, as we should. But I think Baker Mayfield still turns in a useful fantasy performance, somewhere on the order of 249 yards and a couple of touchdown passes.
Beller, you forgot the 28-yard reception to Njoku to get him to 267 from the 249.
There it is. There it is. And then 1 for 27 for David Njoku. I did somehow. I forgot about that. I did. You're right, Brandon.
This next one's not a fill in the blank. It's an either or. I have a pumpkin. Should I carve it or draw a face on it? What do you think here, Brandon?
I think you draw the face on it so that you can carve it out. That's how you do it. And look, a pumpkin at its finest is when you got the carving and then you drop the candle in there so it can glow at night. You don't get that effect with the face drawing.
Yep, I'm with Brandon on this. You got to scoop. You got to carve, scoop it out, cook up some pumpkin seeds. They're delicious. Definitely carve it. Don't be easy with just the face.
What are you doing? With like a sweet dusting of something, like cinnamon and sugar on those pumpkin seeds, or something salty?
I'm more of a salty guy personally, but you can go either way. You can whatever floats your boat. It's going to be tasty.
Put those hands together. You put them sweet and salty. That's a thing.
Make 2 trays.
Yeah.
I want to see someone decorate a pumpkin with Jake. I want like check the link, like full carving of Jake's face, like just a really like all-in pumpkin. Really,
it feels too messy for Jake. I don't think he's in.
Jake won't do it, but I just want one of the dedicated fans of Jake out there to go ahead and carve Jake's brand into it.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. Jake's not cleaning out a pumpkin. All right, true or false? I will try to watch as much of the Denver game today because watching a game while it's snowing is awesome. What do you think, Beller?
Sure. I'll say true there. I'll say I'll try to watch. It is a lot of fun to have the snow falling and the snow rolling around and dudes doing snow angels after they score touchdowns as celebrations, and a sign that we are really deep into football season, right? We're getting our first snow day game of the season. It's not going to be our last, but a sign that we are very firmly entrenched in the football season. It's a rite of passage every year. So I'm happy that I'm happy that we are not only getting it this early in the season, but that it is not in the city where I live.
Also,
a nice bonus to have that. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea of it sounds fun. It could be that you start in and and all of a sudden you're getting flags for late hits because guys can't stop themselves from hitting the quarterback and things like that. And it could turn ugly. I don't discount that, but my initial excitement is, oh, hey, a game in the snow, something different. So, yeah, I'll probably get excited like a Tuesday night. You get excited. Just something different than the norm is always fun.
This is a better late afternoon block this week than usual. You get the Bucs-Raiders game, which was swapped, of course, with Seahawks-Cardinals, but you have San Francisco-New England, even though it's low scoring. It's at least a good matchup. Jags-Chargers, lots of fantasy goodness there, and then this Chiefs-Broncos matchup all in that 4 o'clock Eastern window. Last fill in the blank. Henry Ruggs will have a blank game than DeAndre Swift. We'll go to you first, Brandon.
Worse. And that's, look at, I like the idea of Henry Ruggs. I think he's a little overrated because of the environment. You look at the Raiders so far, that no one's throwing to their receivers less. I know you get the air yards floated out for Henry Ruggs. He's dominating them. But it's just like if he's not getting more than 3 or 4 targets, I don't know how you can trust this guy. And so far, we haven't seen a whole lot of targets go his way. I think this is a work in progress. DeAndre Swift, we maybe saw the beginning of a breakout last week, and I think behooves you to have to follow that if you're trying to decide between these two on a fantasy lineup.
I agree with Brandon on the worst straight up, so I'll give a little bit of different answer. How about less anxiety inducing? At least you know what you're getting into with Henry Ruggs, right? You're hoping for a big play. You're hoping for enough targets to show up and give you a decent game, but you know exactly what it's going to be. And if it's something that isn't great, you're not going to be too upset about it because your expectations were realistic. DeAndre Swift, as much as we want to see him take over that offense and take over and build on what happened in week 6, there's still going to be plenty of Adrian Peterson in the game plan, as we heard from Chris Burke. So you're going to be sitting there very tense, waiting for that big play from DeAndre Swift, waiting for him to pay off. If it happens early, then you can sit back and relax and take a deep breath. If it doesn't happen, we're sitting here at 2 o'clock Eastern time, and it's getting into halftime, and DeAndre Swift is giving you 6 carries for 24. You're going to be pretty nervous about what's happening in the second half. So even though I would, without question, without even thinking about it, play DeAndre Swift over Henry Ruggs, I think you're going to have a little bit more anxiety about DeAndre Swift play.
I am curious to see. We saw more Swift coming out of the Lions bye week. I wonder if we'll see that target floor tick up a little bit for Henry Ruggs this week against Tampa Bay, or if we're going to have to wait a bit longer for that to materialize. Let's get to survivor picks for this week. Who do you like, Brandon? Who's making it through?
I like the Chargers. I mean, they've been almost winning, basically every week. Justin Herbert almost getting his first win as an NFL starting quarterback. Well, now you get a home game. You get the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think this is finally Justin Herbert's opportunity to get a win under his belt. And so I feel really good about them.
I think I heard some agreement
coming off of
there from Beller.
Yeah, definitely like the Chargers. If you're going to go in a different direction, Bills, it's never a bad idea to fade the Jets, so we feel good about the Bills here. I think the Chargers are going to be a very popular pick because they probably haven't been used very much either. So if you wanted to fade the Chargers, hope for some Minshew magic, knock a bunch of people out of your league, and then go in a different direction, Bills are a good way to go. And I think the Chiefs are still a good way to go. Another team that I trust quite a bit on the road against Denver here today. Snow game, no snow game, road, home, whatever. Chiefs are the better team. They've got the much better quarterback. They're in a better position. I think that we can trust the Chiefs in this one.
And the Rams, Biller, sorry. The Rams on Monday night. Your Bears
I could get into that. I could get into that quite a bit. I think do we know who the Rams have beaten this year? Or is everyone aware of this fact? 4 wins, 4-2. You know who their 4 wins are against?
We're about to be reminded.
Dallas,
go ahead and give it to us.
In week 1.
The 4 teams of the NFC East. That's who the Rams' 4 wins have come against this season. So I think we might be pushing them a little bit earlier than we should be. Actually, I like the Bears with the 6. The Bears are +6 right now. I love the Bears with the 6. I think it's hard to run away from that defense. Not sure if I'm ready to say they're going to win the game, but it's going to be a good game on Monday night.
All right, we got one last question to get to before we say goodbye. Question comes from Pickle Rick. Man, who else's league is screwed up by Aaron Jones not playing this week? Yeah, he's been kind of important for me in the fishbowl, so I am definitely missing him this week. Thanks for the question, Pickle Rick. We got Jordan Mills here with the Jamal Williams or Gio Bernard in a standard league. What do you think, Brandon?
Yeah, I look at Jamal Williams as kind of like the better version of Justin Jackson this week, the guy who's filling in for the injury, who can really get it done in the passing game, but also showed some burst in the running game as well. And you feel good about him getting 15+ touches. I will take that in the matchup of the 2 worst run defenses in terms of fantasy against running backs in the Texans and the Packers. So you want running backs in this game, and Jamal Williams is positioned well as the lead guy for the Packers.
What do you think there, Beller?
I'm in agreement with Brandon. I understand why we're all starting Giovanni Bernard. If I had him on a team, I would be starting him too. But let's pump the brakes. Let's not get super excited here just yet. I don't think this is going to be someone just stepping into a Joe Mixon role to begin with. And then even if he were someone who is capable of filling the Joe Mixon role the way that Mixon does, the last time we saw a double-digit carry game from Giovanni Bernard was more than 2 years ago, September 30th, 2018. That's the last time he has carried the ball more than 10 times in a game, more than 8 times in a game. So I don't think he's just ready to step in and be like, all right, give me 18 carries and 8 targets. I'm ready to go here. I'm the guy. I think we're going to see a little bit more Travion Williams than people are bargaining for. Again, if I have Giovanni Bernard, I am almost certainly playing him. So this is not a don't play him, but let's be realistic. I think we should be expecting steady running back 2 numbers, not push the running back 1 class.
Right. I think in season long, you play him because you're probably in a desperation spot where you almost have to. But in DFS, where he's going to be chalky in tournaments, you don't have to play him. There are alternatives, and you should use those alternatives for the reasons that you guys outlined. Any parting shots here before we get on to week 7?
Go Cardinals. Screw you, Brandon.
love the switch to the Seahawks on Sunday night. It's gonna be fun. Getting together with friends, that's gonna be fun. The snow game will be fun as well.
All right, guys, enjoy week 7. Looking forward to talking to you again next week.
All right, good luck, everyone. Let's go get W's.
That is going to wrap things up for our Week 7 episode of the Athletic Fantasy Cheat Sheet presented by JockMKT. Take control of your fantasy sports experience and download JockMKT now in the App Store. The Android app is coming soon. Again, you can get all of our written fantasy football content, including Jake's rankings, for just $1 a month at theathletic.com/cheat sheet. For Jake Seeley, Brandon Funston, Michael Beller, Ed Mallion, Virginia Zakas, Chris Burke, and our man behind the scenes, Nando DeFino, I'm Derek Van Riper. Thanks for watching. Good luck in Week 7.